Hi everyone, welcome back to DFTW, a channel to see the world from a different angle. Please subscribe to our channel so you do not miss our daily uploads. Today we talk about the relations among China, Japan, and the Philippines, and the leading factor behind the chaos in the Western Pacific, the rivalry between China and the United States. In the opening decades of the 21st century, the strategic landscape of East and Southeast Asia has been reshaped by economic dynamism, historical grievances, and rising power competition. At the center of this transformation are three pivotal countries: China, Japan, and the Philippines. Their trilateral relations and interactions illuminate broader trends in regional security, particularly as tensions between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America shape strategic choices in the West Pacific. China's growing maritime assertiveness, military modernization, and expansive territorial claims, particularly in the East and South China Seas, have triggered deep recalibrations among its neighbors. Japan and the Philippines, both treaty allies of the United States, have responded by strengthening defense cooperation among themselves and with Washington. These developments reflect not just bilateral tensions with Beijing, but the larger backdrop of U.S.-China strategic rivalry that increasingly defines security in the Asia-Pacific. China and Japan share centuries of economic and cultural exchange. Yet, their modern relationship is marred by historical grievances, Japan's actions during World War II, particularly, and strategic competition. In maritime Asia, one of the most visible points of friction is the dispute over a group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea known as the Senkaku Islands in Japan and the Diaoyu Islands in China. While Japan administers the islands, Beijing claims them and periodically sends Coast Guard vessels and aircraft into contested waters and airspace. It has forced Japan on several occasions to scramble military jets and protest against perceived violations of its territorial rights. Most recently, Tokyo protested Chinese resource development in the East China Sea, calling it extremely regrettable and part of a pattern of assertive behavior in the region. Amid these tensions, Japanese strategic policy has shifted. Japan has embarked on a significant expansion of its defense posture, including reinterpretations of its post-war pacifist constitution and deeper defense cooperation with regional partners. These moves are widely seen as responses to China's growing military capabilities and assertiveness. To gain more support for her remilitarization goal, Sanai Takeuchi even stated that, in the event of Beijing's forcible takeover of Taiwan, Japan might intervene militarily. Many believe someone must stand behind Japan when it is challenging China's sovereignty. The conflict between Beijing and Tokyo is set against the backdrop of intensifying tensions between China and the United States, two superpowers engaged in fierce competition on most fronts. The tension between China and the Philippines over the South China Sea has been even more fraught. Beijing asserts claims over virtually all islands in the entire South China Sea based on its 10-line. In 2016, an arbitral ruling rejected China's claim. Still, Beijing never recognized the ruling, and has since bolstered its physical presence through the construction of artificial islands and the expansion of its maritime forces. The U.S. sent its aircraft carrier strike groups to back the Philippines when Beijing openly called the ruling a waste of paper. In response, the Chinese Navy also deployed its warships to confront the Americans. The world was on the brink of a regional war, but at the last moment, the U.S. retreated, and since then, it has never faced the Chinese warships by itself. The U.S. lost its last chance to stop China's military rise, and began to play the Taiwan desperately to slow down China's reunification progress. Since 2017, when President Xi Jinping's so-called good friend became the POTUS, the U.S. and its allies have sent dozens of warships across the Taiwan Strait to flex their muscles. Even so, China has been described as a threat to the world by mainstream Western media, when swarms of warships from thousands of miles away challenged its sovereignty at its doorstep. Over the past hundreds of years, long before the countries surrounding the South China Sea came into being, Chinese officials of various dynasties already visited the vast waters, named the islands, and put them on Chinese maps. After 1945, when Japan surrendered unconditionally, the nationalist government of China published an 11-line map to reinstate its claim to the islands, and even today, the Taiwan authorities still use the original 11 lines. No countries, including the US and its allies, opposed it when the ROC announced it in 1947. The PRC did not invent the 9-line map. Rather, Beijing inherited it from the ROC and adapted it by removing 2 dashes in 1953, thereby creating the well-known 9-line. Recently, China modified it by including Taiwan in the 10th dash on a newly published map, and it is now called the 10-line. It has put Beijing at odds with several Southeast Asian states, especially the Philippines, which asserts it possesses legitimate claims to waters and features such as Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal. Beijing firms rejected Manila's claims to those disputed waters, saying they have long belonged to China. Over the past several years, there have been repeated maritime disputes between Chinese vessels and Philippine ships engaged in resupply missions or routine patrols. Incidents have ranged from the use of water cannon and close-quarters maneuvering to collisions and reported fatalities. The new Philippine administration has adopted a more assertive posture than its predecessor, favoring a strong alliance with the United States while also balancing economic ties with China. This shift, combined with domestic political pressures and public concern over sovereignty, has intensified the rivalry with Beijing. The new president expanded the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, with the U.S. In February 2023, he announced 4 additional military sites accessible to U.S. forces, thus bringing the total number of EDCA sites to 9. The Philippines has become another Japan for the U.S. to encircle China militarily. In January 2026, Japan and the Philippines signed a new defense pact formerly known as the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement, ACSA. This agreement enables the tax-free provision of ammunition, fuel, food, and other military necessities during joint training and operations between the Japanese Self-Defense Forces, SDF, and Philippine forces. It reinforces 2 broader trends. First, greater logistical interoperability between Japanese and Philippine forces in the event of joint exercises, humanitarian missions, and potentially combat scenarios. Second, strengthened deterrence, signaling to China that Tokyo and Manila are prepared to coordinate more robustly on security issues. The agreement was in addition to the Reciprocal Access Agreement signed in mid-2024, which allows Japanese and Philippine forces to conduct larger, more complex military exercises, including live-fire drills on each other's territory. Additionally, both governments continue to negotiate enhanced frameworks for sharing classified security information, a critical element for deeper strategic trust. Beyond bilateral Japan-Philippines pacts, cooperation has expanded into a trilateral relationship involving the United States, which remains the primary defense partner for both countries. Regular joint naval maneuvers, maritime cooperative activities, and intelligence sharing are designed to demonstrate a cohesive front in contested waters. For example, joint patrols and exercises involving U.S., Japanese, and Philippine forces have taken place in the South China Sea, eliciting sharp reactions from Beijing, which accuses these states of disrupting regional stability. The Philippines has also signed defense agreements with other partners, including Canada, further illustrating Manila's effort to diversify security cooperation amid escalating maritime pressures. Ironically, Canada is now prepping itself for a possible U.S. invasion, and it can hardly do anything to help the Philippines if something happens. Japan and the Philippines, along with the United States and other partners, consistently emphasize the importance of a rules-based international order, particularly respecting the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which the U.S. did not sign, and freedom of navigation through vital sea lines of communication in the vastness of the South China Sea and the East China Sea. In their recent defense cooperation dialogues, officials underscored the need to oppose unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion, without naming China directly, a diplomatic way of expressing concern about Beijing's assertive maritime behavior. For both countries, maintaining freedom of navigation through the East and South China Seas is not just a legal principle but an economic imperative. Nearly half of global merchant shipping transits through the South China Sea each year, carrying trillions of dollars worth of goods, including vital energy supplies Japan cannot do without. Domestic political factors also play into the strategic tilts of Tokyo and Manila. In Japan, Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has taken a more assertive stance on China than some predecessors, prompting strong Chinese reactions, especially after remarks suggesting Japan might respond militarily if China attacked Taiwan. In the Philippines, President Marcos Jr. has faced both public concern over the so-called Chinese harassment and pressure from nationalist elements to defend sovereign rights. Surveys indicate strong public support for resisting China's encroachments, raising the political cost of appearing weak. This trend aligns Manila more closely with Washington and Tokyo on security matters while still attempting to balance economic cooperation with Beijing. After the U.S. flew the Venezuelan president and his wife to New York without declaring war on that sovereign country, the Philippines should have sensed more dangers, given the proximity of China and the long distance of the United States. Joining hands with Japan is a natural choice for Manila, even though Japan invaded and occupied the Philippines during World War II, beginning in December 1941, and caused massive destruction and civilian suffering, leaving a lasting impact on Philippine history and regional politics. From Beijing's perspective, these security arrangements are framed as bloc politics aimed at containing China's legitimate defense interests. Chinese officials have repeatedly denounced trilateral and quadrilateral partnerships involving the United States, Japan, and the Philippines, claiming they undermine regional peace and stability. Interestingly, neither Japan nor the Philippines attended the signing ceremony for Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Davos, which made the event less entertaining. China has criticized Japan's export of naval vessels and equipment to the Philippines, accusing Tokyo of forming small cliques to disrupt maritime stability in the South China Sea. Beijing frames such cooperation as a hostile strategy, harking back to historical narratives of Japanese militarism. China's military modernization, including the expansion of its fleet, the development of advanced missiles, and the buildup of maritime militia forces, has enabled more assertive operations in contested waters. Incidents such as collisions between Chinese Coast Guard vessels and Philippine patrol ships, and repeated interference with resupply missions to Philippine outposts, underscore Beijing's willingness to use gray zone tactics without escalating to full-scale conflict. Beijing's strategic calculus is informed by its broader ambitions: secure claimed maritime territory, control critical sea lines of communication, and deter external influences, especially the U.S. military footprint. U.S.-China tension in the West Pacific is the larger strategic context on Earth. The evolving relations among China, Japan, and the Philippines cannot be divorced from the intensifying U.S.-China competition in the so-called Indo-Pacific. Washington views a secure, free, and open Asia-Pacific as essential to global stability and economic prosperity, while Beijing frames U.S. presence as containment. Various analyses have noted that intensifying military competition between the United States and China is prompting Asian countries to reassess their defense postures and alliances. This strategic rivalry influences everything from military planning and joint exercises to diplomatic signaling and defense budgets. The Philippines and Japan, both treaty allies of the United States, find themselves navigating this complex geopolitical environment. Manila's Mutual Defense Treaty with Washington obligates the U.S. to support Manila against armed attacks, a reassurance that has taken on new weight amid South China Sea confrontations. The United States has responded to China's maritime assertiveness by deepening defense cooperation with partners in the region. Trilateral exercises involving U.S., Japanese, and Philippine forces aim to improve interoperability and demonstrate a collective commitment to secure contested waters. The broader network of alliances, including the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue (Quad), which involves the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, further illustrates Washington's strategy of building a web of partnerships to balance China's influence without provoking direct conflict. Beyond military competition, disputes over maritime territory carry significant economic stakes. China's expansive claims, if fully enforced, could effectively control access to vast hydrocarbon reserves, fisheries, and seabed minerals, amplifying its influence over Southeast Asian economies. As the region hurtles toward an uncertain future, several key themes will shape China's relations with Japan and the Philippines. Flashpoints in the East and South China Seas, from contested shoals to fishing rights, carry the risk of miscalculation. China's expanded Coast Guard powers and Japan's vigilant air patrols could spark incidents that, once set in motion, are difficult to contain. Yet all parties have incentives to avoid outright conflict. Diplomatic channels, confidence-building measures, and ASEAN mechanisms remain important, though their effectiveness is limited. Japan and the Philippines will likely continue deepening defense cooperation, not just bilaterally but within a broader coalition involving the United States and other partners. This trend is driven by shared concerns about China's assertiveness and the strategic logic of collective defense. The successful ratification and implementation of agreements, along with continued interoperability exercises, will further integrate Tokyo and Manila into a regional security framework oriented toward deterrence. Trade and investment between China, Japan, and the Philippines remain significant. Economic interdependence, especially Japan-China links, could act as a restraint on conflict escalation even as security tensions grow. For the Philippines, balancing economic ties with Beijing while strengthening defense relations with the United States and Japan will be a delicate act, one that Marcos Jr.'s government appears intent on executing. The triangular dynamics among China, Japan, and the Philippines capture the essence of geopolitical competition in the West Pacific. A resurgent China, intent on securing maritime claims and expanding influence, worries neighbors that are increasingly wary of its intentions, even as Beijing repeatedly says it does not invade other states, unlike another superpower. In response, Japan and the Philippines have deepened their strategic partnership and aligned more closely with the United States, reflecting not just bilateral anxieties, but a broader architecture of collective security in the region. What unfolds next will depend on how Beijing manages its ambitions, how Tokyo and Manila balance deterrence with diplomacy, and whether the wider US-China rivalry can be steered toward stable coexistence rather than confrontation. Ultimately, the future of the so-called Indo-Pacific will hinge on the ability of regional powers to reconcile sovereignty, stability, and economic integration in an increasingly contested maritime domain. Thanks for watching our videos. If you feel they deserve more viewership, please like and forward them to people you know, helping DFTW become a million sub-community soon. At last, great thanks to our supporters who donate through Super Thanks, Patreon, PayPal, WeChat, and Buy Me a Coffee. Without them, the channel should have died years ago.